Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel, and tonight I have something truly terrifying to share with you. While browsing the internet on New Year's Eve, I stumbled upon a Reddit post that seemed like just another creepy story, but the more I dug into it, the more I realized this was something far more sinister. 38 missing people, strange coincidences, unexplainable connections, and a pattern that nobody wants to acknowledge. After watching this video, you will never look at New Year's Eve the same way again. If you enjoy this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because I have many more mysterious stories coming your way. Let's begin. It was December 31st, 2023 when user DarkWatcher91 posted a story on Reddit that would haunt the internet for months to come. The post appeared at exactly 11:59 p.m., just 1 minute before the new year, in a subreddit dedicated to unsolved mysteries and unexplained phenomena. The title was simple yet chilling: "I found a pattern and I wish I had not." What followed was a detailed account that would send investigators, both amateur and professional, down a rabbit hole that seemed to have no bottom. DarkWatcher91 claimed to have discovered a connection between 38 missing persons cases spanning across 7 different countries, all linked by one terrifying detail. Every single person had vanished at the exact moment when their local time zone struck midnight on New Year's Eve. The post was methodical and precise, listing names, dates, locations, and the circumstances surrounding each disappearance with an attention to detail that suggested either extensive research or something far more disturbing: first-hand knowledge. The first case mentioned was Sarah Mitchell, a 24-year-old graphic designer from Portland, Oregon, who disappeared on December 31, 2015. According to the post, Sarah had been at a rooftop party with approximately 40 other guests when the countdown to midnight began. Witnesses reported that she had been standing near the edge of the rooftop holding a glass of champagne and laughing with friends as everyone shouted the final numbers: 10, 9, 8, 7. Multiple people remembered seeing her at the count of 3, but when they all turned to embrace each other at midnight and opened their eyes mere seconds later, Sarah was simply gone. Her champagne glass was found on the ground, still intact with champagne inside, and her phone was discovered on a nearby table with a text message typed but never sent that read, "Do you see them too?" Security cameras on the building showed nothing unusual, and there was no possible way for her to have left the rooftop without being seen by dozens of witnesses. The police investigation went nowhere, and the case was eventually filed away as a bizarre unsolved disappearance. The second case was even stranger. Marcus Chen, a 31-year-old software engineer from Singapore, vanished on December 31, 2016 while attending a massive public New Year celebration at Marina Bay. Marcus had been with a group of 8 friends positioned near the waterfront to watch the fireworks display, and he had been actively taking photos on his phone throughout the evening. His friends stated that during the countdown, Marcus had suddenly stopped responding to them and appeared to be staring at something in the crowd, though they could not determine what had caught his attention. At the stroke of midnight, as fireworks exploded overhead and thousands of people cheered, Marcus simply was not there anymore. His phone was found on the ground exactly where he had been standing, with the camera app still open, and the last photo he had taken showed the crowd around him, but with one disturbing detail. In the background, barely visible among the mass of people, was a figure that appeared to be wearing an old-fashioned plague doctor mask with a long beaked nose and dark robes despite the tropical climate. None of Marcus's friends remembered seeing anyone in such an outfit, and enhanced analysis of the photo revealed that the figure seemed to be staring directly at the camera. The post continued with case after case, each following the same pattern: person attends New Year's Eve celebration. Person disappears at exactly midnight. Person leaves behind some small piece of evidence that hints at something wrong. There was Elena Vasquez from Madrid, who vanished from a crowded plaza in 2017, leaving behind only her shoes neatly placed side by side. There was James O'Brien from Dublin, who disappeared from a pub filled with over 100 people in 2018, and whose final social media post showed him typing, "They are not human," before the message cut off. There was Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo who vanished from a shrine visit in 2019 and whose camera contained a video accidentally recorded in her pocket that captured audio of her speaking to someone in a language that linguistic experts could not identify. Each disappearance had been investigated independently, and in every case the authorities had found no evidence of foul play, no bodies, no witnesses who saw anything suspicious, and no logical explanation for how someone could simply cease to exist in front of dozens or even hundreds of other people. Darkwatcher91 explained in the post that the connection between these cases had never been made because they occurred in different countries, were handled by different law enforcement agencies, and happened over a span of several years. It was only through obsessive research and cross-referencing of international missing persons databases that the pattern became visible. But the truly horrifying part of the post was not the disappearances themselves, but what Darkwatcher91 claimed to have discovered about the people who vanished. According to the post, every single one of the 38 missing people had one additional thing in common. In the weeks leading up to their disappearance, each of them had reported experiencing strange dreams. These dreams were remarkably similar across all cases, despite the victims never having met or communicated with each other. In the dreams, they described being in a vast empty space that was neither dark nor light but something in between, a gray void where distance and direction had no meaning. In this void they would encounter figures that were humanoid in shape but wrong in ways they struggled to articulate, too tall or too thin, with movements that did not quite match human biomechanics. The figures never spoke but communicated through a sensation of pressure inside the dreamer's skull, and the message was always the same: an invitation to join them when the old year dies and the new year is born. Most of the victims had dismissed these dreams as stress or anxiety related to the holiday season, but several had mentioned them to friends or family, or had written about them in private journals or online posts that were discovered after their disappearances. Darkwatcher91 included screenshots and archived links to prove these claims, including a blog post from Sarah Mitchell written 2 weeks before she vanished, where she described having recurring nightmares about tall figures in gray space who wanted her to come with them. She had written it off as her subconscious processing stress from her job, but the detail and specificity of her description matched almost exactly what other victims had reported. The Reddit post then took an even darker turn when Darkwatcher91 revealed why the username had been chosen and why this research had been conducted. The user claimed to be the younger sibling of one of the missing people, a victim not included in the list of 38 because Darkwatcher91 wanted to maintain some degree of anonymity. This personal connection had driven the investigation and led to the discovery of the pattern, but it had also led to something else. Darkwatcher91 had started having the dreams too. The post described experiencing the same gray void, the same impossible figures, the same pressure in the skull that felt like communication without words, and the same invitation to join them at midnight on New Year's Eve. Darkwatcher91 wrote that the dreams had begun exactly 3 weeks before posting, which meant they had started in early December of 2023. The post concluded with a chilling statement: "I am sharing this information because I believe I will be the 39th person to disappear, and I want someone to know the truth. If you are reading this after midnight on January 1st, 2024, then I am already gone. Please continue this research and please warn others who might be experiencing these dreams. They are real and they are coming. Do not be alone at midnight. Do not close your eyes during the countdown. And whatever you do, if you see figures in gray space, do not accept their invitation." The post ended there with no follow-up comments from Darkwatcher91, and when users tried to check the account profile the next day, they found it had been deleted. The timing was significant because the post had been made at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on December 31st, 2023, which meant that Darkwatcher91 had posted it with only 60 seconds remaining before midnight. Several Reddit users who had seen the post in real time reported that they had tried to reply or send direct messages to Darkwatcher91 immediately but received no response, and within hours the account was gone. The post itself was archived by multiple users before it could be deleted, and it quickly spread across various internet communities devoted to mysteries and paranormal phenomena. Skeptics immediately pointed out that the entire thing could be an elaborate creative writing exercise or an alternate reality game designed to generate viral attention, and there were certainly elements that seemed almost too perfect to be real. However, what made the post impossible to completely dismiss was the fact that the missing persons cases mentioned were real and verifiable. Every name, date, and location could be cross-referenced with actual police reports, news articles, and missing persons databases. The details about the dreams and the gray void figures could not be independently confirmed for all victims, but in at least a dozen cases there was documentary evidence that the missing people had indeed reported experiencing unusual dreams in the weeks before their disappearances. This combination of verifiable facts and unverifiable claims created a perfect storm of uncertainty that kept people investigating. Amateur internet detectives began conducting their own research, trying to find additional cases that fit the pattern or to debunk the existing ones. Some users claimed to have contacted family members of the victims and received confirmation that yes, their loved ones had mentioned strange dreams before vanishing, though these family members were often reluctant to discuss details publicly. Other users analyzed the photo from Marcus Chun's phone and argued about whether the plague doctor figure was real or a digital artifact or a person in costume who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. The debate raged across forums and social media platforms with no clear consensus emerging. Then in late January 2024, something happened that reignited interest in the case. A woman named Patricia Holloway from Manchester, England, contacted police to report that her husband David had disappeared on New Year's Eve under circumstances that exactly matched the pattern described in the Reddit post. David Holloway had been at a house party with Patricia and approximately 30 other people when midnight arrived, and according to Patricia, her husband had been standing right next to her holding her hand during the countdown. She remembered feeling his hand in hers as they counted down together, but when she turned to kiss him at midnight, he was gone. His hand was no longer in hers and he was nowhere to be seen in the room. Other party guests confirmed that David had been there seconds before midnight and had vanished without explanation. What made this case particularly relevant was that Patricia revealed David had been having strange dreams for weeks before his disappearance. Dreams about gray void spaces and tall figures that wanted him to join them. Patricia had not seen the Reddit post before her husband vanished, but when investigators showed it to her during questioning, she broke down crying and said that David had described his dreams using almost the exact same words as those in the post. David Holloway became case number 39, and the existence of this new disappearance following the exact pattern predicted in Dark Watcher 91's post sent shockwaves through the online communities that had been following the story. If the Reddit post had been a hoax or creative writing, then how had it predicted this new case with such accuracy? Some argued coincidence, others suggested that someone had deliberately staged the disappearance to perpetuate the hoax, but Patricia Holloway's grief appeared genuine and police found no evidence that David's disappearance was anything other than a real and baffling missing persons case. The investigation into David Holloway's vanishing revealed another disturbing detail. In the days before he disappeared, David had been researching the Reddit post and had become convinced it was real. He had told Patricia that he believed the dreams were not just dreams but some form of contact or communication from something he could not explain. He had tried to stay awake on New Year's Eve, determined not to be alone at midnight as the post had warned, but he had attended the party with Patricia thinking that being surrounded by people would keep him safe. It had not worked. As news of David Holloway's disappearance spread online, users began reporting that they too had experienced similar dreams. Dozens of people came forward claiming to have had visions of gray void spaces and tall humanoid figures in the weeks leading up to New Year's Eve 2024, though most of these claims could not be verified and many were likely influenced by having read about the phenomenon. However, a few cases stood out because the individuals making the claims had documented their dreams before the Reddit post became widely known. One such person was a college student named Marcus Webb from Toronto who had posted about his recurring nightmares in a private dream journal blog in November 2023 before Dark Watcher 91's post went viral. Marcus described the dreams in detail, including the sensation of pressure in his skull that felt like communication and the overwhelming sense that something was inviting him to go somewhere though he did not know where. When Marcus was contacted by researchers after the Reddit post gained attention, he confirmed that his dreams matched the pattern and admitted he was terrified about what might happen at the next New Year's Eve. Fortunately, Marcus did not disappear during the 2024 New Year's celebration, though he reported feeling an overwhelming urge to leave the group of friends he was with right at midnight and said it took tremendous willpower to resist the compulsion. The question on everyone's mind became, if this pattern is real, then what is causing it and what happens to the people who disappear? Theories ranged from the rational to the fantastical, with explanations including mass hallucination, shared psychosis involving people suggestible to online influence, secret government experiments, interdimensional rips that opened at specific times, alien abduction following a pattern humans had only recently recognized, and supernatural entities that feed on or collect humans during liminal moments when time transitions from one state to another. None of these theories could be proven or disproven because there was simply not enough evidence, and more importantly, there were no bodies, no ransom demands, no sightings of the missing people after their disappearances. They had simply ceased to exist in our world at the stroke of midnight. Law enforcement agencies in multiple countries began to take notice of the pattern, though most remained skeptical about any supernatural or paranormal explanations. Interpol was reportedly made aware of the connection between cases, and at least 2 countries launched special task forces to investigate whether there was a human trafficking ring or serial killer operating across international borders using New Year's Eve celebrations as cover for abductions. These investigations, however, found nothing, and the prevailing theory among official channels was that the apparent pattern was a statistical coincidence amplified by internet hysteria and confirmation bias. As December 2024 approached, the internet was filled with warnings and speculation about what might happen when the clock struck midnight again. Would there be more disappearances, and would they continue to follow the pattern? People who reported having the dreams were advised to stay with groups, to avoid being near edges or open spaces at midnight, and to document everything. Some individuals who claimed to be experiencing the dreams chose to spend New Year's Eve in police stations or hospitals, thinking that being in secure, monitored locations would protect them. When midnight arrived on December 31, 2024, the world watched and waited. Reports began filtering in almost immediately. In total, 7 people disappeared that night under circumstances matching the established pattern. All 7 had reported having dreams about gray void spaces and tall figures in the weeks before New Year's Eve. All 7 vanished at exactly midnight in their respective time zones. All 7 were surrounded by other people when they disappeared. And all 7 left behind small pieces of evidence that suggested something was deeply wrong. One of the 7 was Marcus Webb, the college student from Toronto who, despite taking precautions, had vanished from a New Year's party at his parents' house. His mother reported that she had been holding his hand during the countdown, specifically because Marcus had been frightened about the dreams and wanted to make sure he stayed safe. She felt his hand slip away at midnight, and when she looked, he was gone. The other 6 cases followed similar patterns and included people from Australia, Brazil, South Africa, and Norway, among others. With these new disappearances, the total number of people who had vanished following this specific pattern reached 46. The online communities dedicated to tracking the phenomenon went into overdrive, trying to establish what, if any, connection existed between all the victims beyond the dreams and the timing of their disappearances. Researchers began looking at everything from bloodlines to geographic locations to online activity to diet to medical history, searching for any commonality that might explain why these specific individuals were being targeted, if indeed they were being targeted at all. One researcher named Dr. Elizabeth Santos, a psychologist from Brazil who had lost a colleague to the phenomenon, published a paper suggesting that the dreams might be a form of shared consciousness experience triggered by collective anxiety about temporal transitions. She proposed that certain individuals might be more susceptible to this form of psychological disturbance and that the disappearances could be explained by dissociative fugue states where the person enters a trance-like condition and wanders away without memory of doing so. This theory, however, failed to explain how people could disappear from locked rooftops or how they could vanish while literally holding someone's hand or how security cameras failed to capture any footage of them leaving. Another theory gaining traction was that the phenomenon was related to quantum mechanics, specifically the many worlds interpretation, which suggests that every decision or quantum event creates branching timelines where all possible outcomes occur. Proponents of this theory argued that midnight on New Year's Eve represented a symbolic, if not literal, threshold between states of being and that somehow certain individuals were slipping into alternate timelines or parallel universes at that moment. The dreams were theorized to be a form of precognitive awareness that the individual was about to undergo this transition. This explanation was impossible to test or verify, but it gained popularity because it seemed to account for both the physical disappearances and the complete lack of evidence left behind. As the months of 2020 vibe progressed with December and another New Year's Eve looming, people who began experiencing the dreams faced a terrifying decision. Should they try to avoid the transition by taking extreme precautions, or should they accept that if this was some form of natural phenomenon or cosmic event, there might be no way to prevent it? Some chose to spend New Year's Eve in isolation, hoping that being alone would somehow protect them, though previous cases suggested this made no difference. Others gathered in large groups, believing safety in numbers was their best option. A few individuals who reported having the dreams chose to embrace the experience and stated publicly that they intended to accept the invitation from the figures in gray void space if it came. These individuals theorized that resisting might be what caused the violent suddenness of the disappearances and that accepting willingly might lead to a different outcome. One such person was a philosophy professor named Robert Chen, no relation to Marcus Chen, who had been having the dreams since October 2025. Robert created a video blog documenting his experiences and his decision to accept whatever happened at midnight on New Year's Eve. He described the dreams in detail, explaining that the figures did not feel malevolent to him, but rather neutral, like forces of nature carrying out some function beyond human understanding. He theorized that they might be collectors or guides shepherding certain individuals to somewhere or someone else for reasons we could not comprehend. In his final video posted on December 30, 2025, Robert stated that he believed the phenomenon was real and that he was at peace with whatever was about to happen. He said that he hoped his decision to document everything and to approach the experience without fear might provide some answers that could help others understand what was happening. When midnight struck on December 31, 2025, Robert Chen was at a small gathering with friends who had agreed to film his experience. The footage from that night shows Robert standing calmly in the center of a room as the countdown to midnight begins. He is smiling slightly and his eyes are closed in what appears to be meditation or concentration. As the clock strikes midnight, the footage shows something that had never been captured before. Robert's body does not simply disappear, but rather seems to become translucent for approximately 2 seconds before fading completely from view. The effect is subtle enough that some viewers claimed it was a video editing trick, but multiple cameras from different angles captured the same phenomenon, and forensic analysis of the footage found no evidence of manipulation. Even more disturbing, in the moment before Robert fades, the footage clearly shows several tall, thin, shadowy figures appearing behind him, visible only for a fraction of a second before both Robert and the figures vanish. Robert Chen brought the total number of disappearances to 53, and his video became the most analyzed piece of evidence related to the phenomenon. Frame-by-frame analysis of the footage revealed that the figures behind Robert matched descriptions from the dreams. Impossibly tall, perhaps 7 or 8 feet, with proportions that seemed wrong, as if they had too many joints in their limbs. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were smooth and featureless like mannequins, and they appeared to be reaching toward Robert, though not in a threatening way, but more like guides helping someone cross a threshold. The existence of this footage split the community of researchers and interested parties into two camps. One group believed it proved that something genuinely paranormal or otherworldly was occurring, and that the disappearances were abductions or transitions to another plane of existence orchestrated by non-human entities. The other group maintained that the footage had been faked as part of an elaborate hoax, possibly by Robert himself or by his friends, and that the entire phenomenon was still explainable through conventional means, even if those means had not yet been identified. As December 2026 approached, the pressure and fear surrounding New Year's Eve had reached unprecedented levels. Governments in several countries issued advisories suggesting people avoid large public gatherings at midnight, though the official reasoning given was related to public safety and crowd control rather than any acknowledgement of the disappearances. Mental health professionals reported a significant increase in anxiety and sleep disorders related to New Year's Eve, especially among people who claimed to be having the dreams. Support groups formed both online and in person for individuals experiencing the phenomenon, and several organizations dedicated themselves to researching and documenting cases. Then in November 2026, something happened that changed everything. A woman appeared in a hospital in Oslo, Norway, claiming to be Sarah Mitchell, the first victim who had disappeared from a Portland rooftop in 2015. The woman had no identification, no memory of how she arrived at the hospital, and no explanation for where she had been for 11 years, but she insisted her name was Sarah Mitchell and provided details about her life that matched the missing person case. DNA testing confirmed her identity, and she was indeed Sarah Mitchell, who had been missing for over a decade. When Sarah recovered enough to be interviewed, she provided an account that was both fascinating and terrifying. She claimed that she had not experienced 11 years passing, but rather felt like she had been gone for only a few hours. She described being in the gray void space from the dreams and said that the tall figures had indeed taken her there when she disappeared at midnight. According to Sarah, the void was not a physical place, but rather something like a waiting room or in-between space that existed outside normal time and space. She said there were others there, many others, all people who had been taken at midnight on various New Year's Eves. The figures, she called them the threshold keepers, communicated with the collected humans through sensation rather than language, and explained that they were being held not as prisoners but as witnesses to something Sarah struggled to articulate. She used words like transition and crossing and rebirth, but admitted none of these terms accurately captured what she had experienced. She said the keepers were not hostile but were carrying out some kind of cosmic function related to time and the transition between states, and that humans were occasionally caught in this process. Sarah claimed that most of the people taken would eventually be returned, though not necessarily to the same time they left and not necessarily with full memories of their experience. She said she had been released because her time in the void was complete, though she did not understand what that meant or why she specifically was chosen to return. When asked about the other missing people, Sarah confirmed that she had encountered many of them in the void, including her own return proved that at least some of the disappeared might come back, which provided hope to families of the missing but also raised countless new questions. If Sarah's account was true, then what was the purpose of these collections, and why at New Year's Eve specifically, and what determined who was taken and who was returned? Skeptics pointed out that Sarah might be suffering from severe psychological trauma or false memories, and that her reappearance, while remarkable, did not actually prove anything about supernatural forces or other dimensions. It was possible she had been abducted by human traffickers or had experienced a psychotic break and wandered away only to recover years later with confabulated memories that matched the narrative she had heard about the disappearances. However, the fact remained that Sarah Mitchell had been genuinely missing for 11 years and had now returned with no signs of aging, no evidence of having lived a normal life during that time, and memories that matched details about other victims that had never been made fully public. Medical examinations revealed that Sarah's body showed no signs of having aged 11 years. Her cells, her tissues, everything suggested she was still biologically 24 years old despite being chronologically 35. This biological impossibility could not be explained away by skeptics and lent credibility to her account of being outside normal time. In the weeks following Sarah's return, 2 more people appeared under similar circumstances. Marcos Chun turned up in Singapore at a subway station claiming only hours had passed since his disappearance in 2016, and Elena Vasquez walked into a police station in Madrid insisting she had been missing for only a brief time despite having vanished in 2017. Both provided accounts similar to Sarah's, describing the gray void space, the threshold keepers, and the sensation of being outside time. Both showed no signs of aging appropriate to the years they had been missing, and both carried memories of encountering other victims in the void. The return of these 3 individuals sent shock waves through both the believing and skeptical communities. Families of other victims held on to hope that their loved ones might also return, though the keepers had apparently given no indication of when or if others would be released. Researchers intensified their efforts to document and understand the phenomenon, now believing they might be dealing with something genuinely beyond current scientific understanding. Government agencies that had previously dismissed the cases as coincidence or hoax began quietly investigating with more seriousness, though no official public statements acknowledged any supernatural or paranormal elements. As December 2026 arrived, the world faced another New Year's Eve with a mixture of dread and fascination. The 3 returned victims were kept under close observation by researchers and government officials, hoping they might provide insight or warning if another wave of disappearances was imminent. Sarah Mitchell, Marcos Chun, and Elena Vasquez all reported feeling a pull or call as the date approached, similar to what they had experienced before their original disappearances, but they could not say whether this meant they would be taken again or if it was simply residual psychological impact from their experiences. When midnight struck on December 31, 2026, the number of disappearances was smaller than in previous years. Only 3 people vanished following the established pattern. This reduction led some to theorize that the phenomenon might be winding down, or that the returns of Sarah, Marcos, and Elena had somehow satisfied whatever requirement the threshold keepers had been fulfilling. Others worried that the smaller number meant the keepers were becoming more selective, or that something about the nature of the phenomenon was changing in ways humans could not predict. Throughout 2027, more victims began returning, always appearing suddenly with no memory of the passage of time and always describing the same gray void and the same entities. By December 2027, 31 of the original disappeared had returned, though that still left dozens unaccounted for, including Dark Watcher 91, whose identity was eventually discovered to be Jennifer Hartley, the younger sister of Emily Hartley, who had disappeared on New Year's Eve 2022. Jennifer herself had vanished as predicted after making the Reddit post and had not yet returned despite many of her fellow victims reappearing. The phenomenon continued into 2028 and beyond, though the frequency of disappearances seemed to decrease over time. Each New Year's Eve brought new cases, but in smaller numbers, and each year brought more returns of previous victims. The pattern suggested some kind of cycle or rotation, as if the threshold keepers were processing humans in batches and releasing them according to criteria no one could determine. Scientific research into the phenomenon intensified, with governments finally acknowledging publicly that something unexplained was occurring, though official statements carefully avoided using terms like supernatural or otherworldly. Instead, they spoke of localized temporal anomalies and quantum effects that were not yet fully understood, implying the phenomenon might eventually be explained through advanced physics rather than paranormal means. The dreams continued to be reported by people around the world in the weeks leading up to each New Year's Eve, and psychologists developed screening tools to identify individuals who might be at risk of disappearing. Some people who experienced the dreams and took extreme precautions still vanished, while others who seemed certain to disappear remained safe, leading researchers to conclude that there was still no reliable way to predict or prevent the phenomenon. By 2030, the total number of people who had disappeared reached 107, while 83 had returned. The accounts from returned victims remained consistent, all describing the gray void, the threshold keepers, and the sense of being outside time, though none could adequately explain the purpose of their collection or what the keepers were actually doing. Some returned victims reported having glimpsed something beyond the void, a kind of barrier or membrane that the keepers seemed to be maintaining, but descriptions of this were vague and often contradictory. The most disturbing account came from a returned victim named David Patterson, who had disappeared in 2027 and reappeared in 2029. David claimed that during his time in the void he had managed to communicate more directly with one of the keepers and had received an impression, not quite a message but something close, that suggested the collections were related to preventing something catastrophic. According to David's interpretation, the keepers were removing certain individuals at specific moments to maintain balance in reality itself, and that without these removals something he described as unraveling would occur. Whether this interpretation was accurate or simply David's mind trying to make sense of an incomprehensible experience remained unknown. As the years passed and the phenomenon became an accepted, if not understood, part of reality, society adapted in strange ways. New Year's Eve celebrations became more subdued in some places, with people afraid to gather in large groups or be outside at midnight, while in other places they became more defiant, with massive parties held specifically to challenge whatever force was taking people. Support networks for families of the disappeared grew into significant organizations advocating for research funding and government transparency. The returned victims, most of whom struggled with reintegration into a world that had moved on without them, formed their own community, sharing experiences and trying to make sense of their collective trauma. The scientific community remained divided between those who believed the phenomenon represented a genuine break in understood physics requiring entirely new theoretical frameworks, and those who insisted there must be a rational explanation within existing paradigms, even if it had not yet been discovered. Philosophical and religious groups debated the implications endlessly. Was this evidence of other dimensions, proof of supernatural forces, a sign of alien intervention, or something else entirely? No consensus emerged, and the threshold keepers themselves remained silent, offering no further insight into their nature or purpose beyond what could be gleaned from the fragmentary experiences of returned victims. By 2035, the original Reddit post by Darkwatcher91 had become one of the most famous pieces of internet content in history, studied, analyzed, and referenced countless times. Jennifer Hartley, who had written it, remained missing, having never returned from the void despite being one of the earliest to disappear after documenting the pattern. Her research and her warning had been validated in the most horrifying way possible, and her absence served as a constant reminder that some questions might never be answered and some people might never come home. The story of the New Year's Eve disappearances and the 38 that became 107 and counting continues to unfold each year, bringing new cases, new returns, and new mysteries. Families wait, hoping their loved ones will reappear, while researchers scramble to understand a phenomenon that defies explanation. The threshold keepers maintain their vigil, whatever their purpose, collecting individuals at the stroke of midnight when the old year dies and the new year is born, for reasons that remain frustratingly beyond human comprehension. And every December, as the year draws to a close, people around the world check their dreams and wonder if they will be next to receive the invitation to join the others in the gray void space where time has no meaning and reality bends to accommodate forces we cannot see or understand. The phenomenon serves as a reminder that despite all our technology and knowledge, there are still mysteries in this world that resist explanation, still forces at work that operate according to rules we have not discovered, and still moments when the boundary between what we know and what we fear becomes terrifyingly thin.